This is perhaps the most crucial time in our history, a time of the utmost depravity, corruption, greed, and barbarism, a time of lies, subterfuge, and the perpetration of evil on a planetary scale, but also a time of potential breakthrough to a higher level of consciousness, recognizing that we are inseparably connected to each other, to the world around us, and to the wider universe, and that each one of us has a vital role to play in bringing our world back into harmony with the evolutionary intention of the cosmos. In the language of alchemy, this means to reconnect the great below with the great above, as in this extraordinary 17th century image. We tread a path which is on the knife edge between birthing this new vision on the one hand and social disintegration and regression into barbarism, perhaps the virtual extinction of our species, on the other. The explanation of this picture is in the end of the chapter on alchemy in my book, The Dream of the Cosmos. I won't go into it now because it's too complicated, but I think you can see how the world below is connected to the divine world above and how they are all one, so to speak. That is what the picture is trying to tell us. We live in a world culture that could be described as insane. It is insane because the great below has become disconnected from the great above. The planet is controlled by men who are in thrall, as they were 2,000 years ago, to what Jesus called Caesar, or the ruler of the world. The ruler of the world is the addiction to power, conquest, weapons, and war. 70,000 young Russian men have been killed in just 2 months, and an unknown number of Ukrainian young men. These deaths cause inconceivable suffering to their families. There is no recognition in our world about what is a supreme value, supreme importance. In his biography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Jung wrote, "The decisive question for humanity is, are we related to something infinite or not? That is the telling question of our life. Only if we know that the thing which truly matters is the infinite, can we avoid fixing our interests upon futilities and upon all kinds of goals which are not of real importance. If we understand and feel that here in this life, we already have a link with the infinite, desires and attitudes change. In the final analysis, we count for something because of the essential we embody. And if we do not embody that, life is wasted." Long ago, in shamanic cultures, we knew how to communicate with the life of the earth, with the spirits of the plants, the water, the mountains, the animals, and with the life of the cosmos, the sun, the moon, and the stars in the night sky. Today, we have lost those skills and are increasingly losing the skill of communicating with each other, listening to each other. Jung commented on this and said that we really had to learn again to listen to what he called the spirit of the depths, the spirit of our primordial soul. All this has come about because over centuries and millennia, the visible material world has been separated from the invisible one. We have lost the thread of Ariadne that once connected us to our cosmic source. Belief, directed by powerful priesthoods, became a substitute for direct shamanic experience of the source. We lost touch with our soul. Cut off from soul, our left hemispheric mind has become impoverished, rigid, dogmatic, and inflated. In compensation for the loss of relationship with soul, it has become driven by the need for ever more power and control, which is why we find ourselves in the extraordinary situation we are in today, when millions are suffering, not only from wars and hunger and misery, but from physical and mental illness. and we are threatened with a technology that could replace our species with a transhumanist agenda created by AI, which could bring our species to an end. We need urgently to find our way back the way we have come, towards nature and the ground of our own nature. There seem to be two widely divergent views of our presence on this planet. Are we alone in the cosmos, the chance product of a lifeless, mechanistic universe that is without consciousness, intelligence, meaning, or purpose? Or are we on an incredible evolutionary journey of discovery that has brought us to this crucial time of choice, when we must relinquish old habits, free ourselves from the web of evil in which we have become enmeshed, and listen to the guidance of the divinity that is within us and that we are part of? Over recent centuries, we have reached dazzling heights of scientific, medical, and technological advances, which have transformed the conditions of our lives on this planet and facilitated a phenomenal expansion of our ability to express the creative genius of our species in multiple ways. But we have also suffered a catastrophic loss of soul, a loss of the ancient awareness of the sacred interweaving of all aspects of life, a loss of relationship with the life of the planet and the inner life of the cosmos. On the one hand, we have been impaled on a cosmology of separation for nearly 3,000 years, with a concept of God who is above and beyond the created order, and from whose image the divine feminine has been excised. On the other hand, the beliefs of scientific materialism have told us that there is no higher authority than our conscious mind, and that we are the only conscious beings in a lifeless universe. Now, I think one could say that four powerful myths have directed Western civilization over some 2,500 years. First of all, the Genesis myth of the creation of the world by a father God. Secondly, the myth of the fall, created in 623 BCE and put into Genesis 2 and 3. Thirdly, the myth of Jesus as the only Son of God, created by Christian bishops at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. And fourthly, the myth of scientific materialism or scientism, created over the last 300 to 400 years. These four myths, in my view, have distorted our concept of reality, leading to the crisis that we find ourselves in now. I'm going to go through these one at a time. So here we have an image of God the Father creating the world, this very beautiful painting. This myth is in the book of Genesis, in the Bible, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. Secondly, we have the myth of the fall of man, created in 623 BCE. In this myth, the image of deity is the Great Father. Divine immanence is lost. The emphasis is on the transcendence of God or spirit. Earth becomes a place of exile and punishment for primordial sin. Man is given dominion over the earth, but he is no longer part of the divine order. He is exiled to a world contaminated by the fall and subject to sin, suffering, and death, introduced into the world by Eve. Thirdly, we have the myth of Jesus as the only Son of God, whose sacrificial death redeemed humanity from its sins, created at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. I will come back to this later on. And finally, the myth of scientific materialism, or scientism as it's sometimes called, created over the last 300 to 400 years when science separated itself from the stifling control of religion. And it has stated that we are the only conscious beings in a vast, uncaring, dead universe that is without intelligence, consciousness, meaning, or purpose. God and the soul are no more than residual superstitions. Consciousness originates in the neurons of the brain and dies with the death of the physical body, so there is no survival of the soul. In the words of Yuval Harari, spokesman for the World Economic Forum, life has no script, no playwright, no producer, and no meaning. We are no more than hackable animals. If there is a single idea that has facilitated our ability to harm the planet, it is the belief of scientific materialism that the earth and nature have no consciousness and that we are separate from the life around us. It therefore does not matter what we do to matter. Now, these four myths have had incalculable effects on our soul and have distorted our concept of reality, leading to the crisis that we find ourselves in now. How did these myths come into being? To answer this question, I need to take you back to the year 623 BCE, to the first temple in Jerusalem, when things began to go wrong. A group of priests called Deuteronomists, on the orders of King Josiah, took over the temple. They got rid of every trace of the old shamanic cosmology and the high priest who had presided over the temple. They got rid of the angelic beings, the hosts of heaven, that the high priest had communicated with. They got rid of the goddess Asherah and created the myth of the fall of man. Henceforth, there would only be a monotheistic God, a God who was later inherited by the Christian Church. Many Jews were appalled by this coup and fled to Alexandria, taking with them the rituals and cosmology of the first temple. I believe that these were much later to become the cosmology of Kabbalah, known as the voice of the dove and the jewels of the heavenly bride. The banished goddess became the Shekinah of Kabbalah, with the same titles as the former goddess, Queen of Heaven, Divine Wisdom, and the Holy Spirit. The original creation story was very different. In the most ancient tradition of Israel, Yahweh was both female and male, and it was they who co-created the world together. The consort of Yahweh was called Wisdom, the Queen of Heaven, the bright and radiant one whose teaching was like the light of the dawn. But Wisdom was abandoned by her husband. This is from a book written by Dr. Margaret Barker called The Great High Priest. The Queen of Heaven was called Asherah or Ashrata. She was worshipped as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, and also as the tree of life, a wondrous tree that connected the invisible and visible worlds, whose fruit brought the gift of immortality. Her title was Mother of All Living, a title that the Deuteronomists gave to Eve. The story of her violent expulsion can be read in the Old Testament, but it is rarely, if ever, recognized for what it is. The lady has been hidden, removed from the Bible by the ancient translators and the ancient editors, and then overlooked by the scholars. There are dozens of examples like this, not only in English translations of the Bible, but over many centuries. This is the story I shall tell, how the great lady became the lost lady. All traces of the goddess and her association with wisdom were deleted from the books of the Old Testament, with the exception of the book of Proverbs. Now, what happened as a result is what I've tried to show in this slide. What happened when Asherah was excised, as it were, when she was no longer the bride of Yahweh, is that nature became cut off from spirit. This is the most important finding that I think I've made from this particular date, 623 BCE. The result of this cutting off from nature was monotheism, and also a dualism, because we have spirit up there, so to speak, and nature down below. There is no union between the two. There's no union of the above and the below. And this is the legacy from that time that's come down for 2,500 years, little bit more than that, so that nature is no longer sacred, which it once was, because of the goddess, and because the goddess represented the whole of nature in her being, as well as the cosmic sky, as it were, the cosmos itself. So a huge amount was lost in this one act, which made Yahweh the sole God, so to speak. So I have to leave that with you, if you can remember that this is like cutting an umbilical cord, which I will say in a few minutes as well, go into more detail. So what happened as we moved into the era of the monotheistic transcendent God of the patriarchal religions is that the older shamanic relationship with the earth and a living cosmos was gradually lost, and with it the idea that the whole of nature was sacred, infused with divinity, ensouled. The priest replaced the shaman, and the umbilical cord between spirit and nature was finally severed. And this is the legacy that we've inherited today, and why we're dealing with the problems of a nature that we've completely neglected for 2,500 years, really. So the deeper layers of the soul, everyone's soul, which held the memory of a life of participation in creation, and the instinctual awareness of the unity of life governed by divine law, understood for thousands of years through the image of the goddess, was silenced. And this was when we began to lose touch with our primordial soul. This is a wonderful painting by Cecil Collins, which is one of my favorites, which really depicts the goddess and the relationship, her relationship with the life of the earth. Now, the Deuteronomists didn't stop after their elimination of the goddess. They also created the myth of the fall, with its image of disobedience, guilt, punishment, and exile from the Garden of Eden to earth. This dreadful myth has had catastrophic effects on women's view of themselves and on men's view of women and the feminine aspect of their nature. The Christian church jumped on the bandwagon of the disparagement and persecution of women, leading eventually to thousands being sent to the stake for consorting with the devil. Now, the effects of this polarizing mythology were myriad, really, because nature, body, and woman were downgraded in relation to spirit, mind, and man. Light and good were associated with spirit and the male. Darkness and evil were associated with nature, matter, the body, and the female. Woman was named as a secondary and inferior creation and became subject to man because of that naming, and her ancient sacred role as Sibyl, priestess, shaman, and prophetess was effaced forever. Body was split off from mind, and mind from soul. These effects really need thinking about in detail. In my other talks and in my books, I've gone into them, but this is just a brief summary of what happened. Now, in the third myth, at the Council of Nicaea, the Christian image of a trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit became wholly identified with the male gender. There was the formulation of the Creed, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and Jesus was declared to be of the same substance as God, not like unto God as the Arian bishops wanted, but of the same substance as God. So the ancient connection between the Holy Spirit, divine wisdom, and the Divine Mother was for Western civilization tragically and finally lost. Also lost was the essential message of Jesus about love and about all of us being sons and daughters of God. His marriage to Mary Magdalene was erased. No trace of it remained. And she was demonized as a whore by one of the popes at the end of the 6th century. Henceforth, there would be no feminine element in the Godhead until 1950, when a papal bull declared the Virgin Mary to be assumed into heaven, body and soul. And in 1954, a further papal encyclical named her Queen of Heaven, thereby restoring to her the cosmic dimension held by the goddess in the great civilizations of the Bronze Age and by the Hebrew goddess Asherah. Now, Jung noted this and thought that it would lead to a change of relationships between men and women. And indeed, this has happened over the last 60 or so years. We've seen a huge change in the relationships. And it could have been as the effect of this encyclical and this new bull. Now, the transformation of a deeply entrenched patriarchal culture extending over some 4 millennia, and the need to bring into being a more balanced and enlightened world culture, demands that we move beyond an outworn image of the sacred. The old image of the sacred is dying so that a new image of the sacred and a new story can emerge in human consciousness. This is taking place as we move into a new astrological age, the age of Aquarius. Alchemy gives us a graphic image of killing the old king, as in this picture. The old king personifies an outworn image of spirit and an outworn paradigm of reality, one that has been cut off from metaphysical reality, cut off from relationship with the invisible world. We are living now in the time of the death of God, marked by social unrest, confusion, conflict, and fear. This is how a Jungian analyst defined this challenging interlude. The breakdown of a central myth is like the shattering of a vessel containing a precious essence. Meaning is lost, and in its place, primitive and atavistic contents are reactivated. Differentiated values disappear and are replaced by the elemental motivations of power and pleasure, or else the individual is exposed to emptiness and despair. And we can see the effects of this in all the depression that is affecting so many young people all over the world, and not only young people, but old people as well. And also in the increasing fighting that is taking place, the distress that's being expressed as fighting. Over the past 50 years, a gradual restoration of the sense of the sacred has been taking place beneath the surface of our culture, despite what I just said that from Edward Erasure, this is taking place at the same time as all the rest, the distress and the fear and the worry in our world. Now, through the awakening power of the environmental movement, as well as through the new scientific discoveries of quantum physics, we are entering a new era where nature, the life of the earth, and all the miraculous processes and patterns of life can once again be recognized as indissolubly connected as they once were in ancient shamanic cultures. This new movement that some call the Great Awakening is beginning to heal the split between spirit and nature, which has so tragically flawed the three patriarchal religions. Thousands, if not millions, of individuals today are searching not only for a unified field in science, but for a unified vision of life, a unified vision of spirit, nature, and humanity that could mitigate the catastrophic effects of our fragmented view of life. The birthing of this vision asks us to relinquish many cherished beliefs and requires a fundamental transformation of our values. Our knowledge about the world and the universe is accelerating geometrically, and we are overwhelmed with information about every aspect of what we observe. Yet we understand almost nothing about the mystery of why we are here and what the evolutionary role of our species on this planet might be. So I've chosen the Sleeping Beauty to reflect this sleep that we've been in for thousands of years, really. We have to move beyond the hedge of thorns that's been created by the four myths that have indoctrinated us into incomplete or inadequate beliefs. The creation of the world by a male god, the myth of the fall of man, the myth of the only Son of God, and the myth of scientific materialism or scientism. We need to move beyond these myths and ask ourselves four questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Where do we come from? And where do we go when we die? Now, those first two questions are being addressed by many people, but not so much the one, where do we come from? And not so much, where do we go when we die? Except by a few people in America, like Humanity's Team, and a few people who are writing about it, the near-death experience, for instance. Those questions were answered by the Essenes and the Gnostics, but their vision was destroyed by the Christian church in the 4th century when it became taken over by the power principle, the ruler of the world, then as now. Awakening to a new story is the evolutionary imperative of our time. The new story invites a totally different understanding of life, bringing with it more mature values, which profoundly respect all forms of planetary and cosmic life, and a new unified worldview. Opening to the new story involves challenging and releasing ourselves from the power of the old ones. It may be that the old image of God needs to evolve because it is incomplete. It may not be God who is dying, but rather the image we've projected onto him, an image that was formulated by different priesthoods according to their level of understanding at a specific historical time. God may be longing for release from his imprisonment in the straitjacket of our beliefs. Like a conjurer demonstrating his skills, we have cut God in two and have lost the sense of the divinity of nature. We have fixed the image of deity in the masculine gender, refusing until very recently to entertain the idea that the feminine aspect of spirit is essential to the completion and balance of the image of deity, and therefore to the balance of a civilization. Now, the great mythologist Joseph Campbell wrote in his book, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space, that from time to time the image of God has to die if it is not to become an idol. It has, he says, to become transparent to transcendence in order to be renewed. And I think this is what is happening now. So I'm going to attempt a definition or a new concept of God or spirit. God or spirit or divine mind, so long projected onto a transcendent male creator, remote from our world, is not something distant from us. Quantum physics shows us that we participate in a cosmic consciousness or intelligence, which is co-inherent with every atom of our being and every particle of matter. At the subatomic level, everything is connected to everything else. The entire creation, visible and invisible, is one life. Divinity is within us as well as all around us. This is the revelation, I believe, that the wisdom tradition and alchemy have stored up for us for 2,000 years, but until now, few were ready to understand it. So to injure the earth or to inflict pain and suffering on other human beings is to injure the universal consciousness, and, since we participate in that consciousness, to injure ourselves. Everything we do affects the whole, whether negatively or positively. This is such a different concept of God and ourselves that it takes some time to assimilate its implications. The insight that divinity is present in every single atom of life is precisely what has been missing in our concept of God, and it is this which has led to the split between spirit and nature, and ultimately to that between religion and science, as well as to our growing capacity to inflict destruction on each other and on the life of the planet. In splitting the atom and creating weapons of mass destruction, and in killing others who are our soul brothers and sisters, we are mutilating and desecrating the body of God. I will read you this passage from a channeled message from an angel called Alariel in a book called Beyond Limitations by Stuart Wilson and Joanna Prentice. Oneness, he says, will require a complete reorientation of your understanding of reality, and that will be a major shift for you. Vengeance, for example, becomes absurd within the frame of oneness. If all life is an interconnected web of being and consciousness, then who exactly would you be taking revenge upon? Your aim should be to focus on the oneness that you all share, rather than any small differences that seem to divide you. You will be challenged to stay in that truth, whatever happens in your life. This is when the universe will test you, and events will occur to plumb the depth of your commitment to the truth. Living in non-duality and unity, and not judging and forgiving, can be extremely hard and intense. It is difficult not to hate, but to love your enemies. You can condemn their actions, but not condemn them as beings. The challenge now facing humanity is to lay aside the divisive, dualistic way of thinking and feeling, and start looking for common ground, the basis for friendship and cooperation. This realization calls for a huge shift of awareness and a fundamental change in our values. If God or spirit is not something separate from ourselves, something transcendent to nature and planetary life, but is the intelligence and energy of the life process itself, flaring forth at every instant in every region of this vast universe, then, as well as in ourselves, then how we treat so-called inanimate matter, planetary life, and each other becomes a matter of how we are treating God. It transforms obedience to God's commands into love and respect for God's creation, including ourselves, our neighbor, and most importantly, our enemy. Now we are moving from the story of a dead, insentient universe to a new story of a universe that is vibrantly alive and the primary ground of our own consciousness. But more than this, we are moving towards the concept of God and our relationship with God, which is a revelation as great as any that we've had. We are moving from an image of God as a creator separate from creation to an image of spirit as a sublime intelligence within the process of cosmic and planetary evolution, with ourselves as participants in that process. An eternal consciousness participates in the life of this universe, and we are a manifestation of that consciousness, just coming to awareness that we participate in its life, that we are co-creators with it, that we are essentially divine and immortal beings because we are part of it. Now, I just want to show you this statement of the Council of Indigenous Peoples of North America a few years ago. They said, "All life is sacred. We come into life as sacred beings. When we abuse the sacredness of life, we affect all creation." The indigenous people of the planet have never lost this understanding. Now we are living in a time of great danger, danger from the deliberate or accidental release of nuclear weapons that can wipe out the lives of millions of us in a second and devastate the life of the planet. We are also in danger from the biological weapons that are being created in hundreds, if not thousands, of gain-of-function laboratories, two of which were responsible for the recreation of the recent so-called virus. All this activity destined to harming life is evil. How much longer will it take for us to realize that if we are to survive as a species, we will have to put an end to war and the accumulation of these demonic weapons? Today, as Jung said, the world hangs on a single thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. Near the end of The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "Is he capable of resisting the temptation to use his power for the purpose of staging a world conflagration? Is he conscious of the path he is treading and what the conclusions are that must be drawn from the present world situation and his own psychic situation? Does he know that he is on the point of losing the life-preserving myth of the inner man, which Christianity has treasured up for him? Does he realize what lies in store should this catastrophe ever befall him? And is he even capable of realizing that this would be a catastrophe? And finally, does the individual know that he or she is the make-weight who tips the scales. Now, because our situation is so fraught with danger, particularly at this moment, with the situation between Israel and Iran on a knife edge, I decided last year to publish some of the channeled messages that my mother received from 1943 to 65, messages that came from Jesus and St. Francis. During her life, there was no way that she could speak publicly about them. I will share some of them with you now, because I was fortunate enough to know about them from the age of 13 and to inherit her notebooks when she died. They have directed my life and my work. They were published under my name with the title Messages from a Transcendent Dimension. These messages show that we are not alone in the universe, but are watched over by a higher assembly of beings who have our welfare at heart. They began in February 1943 in an apartment in New York, where my mother and a small group of women close to her were gathered together to talk about the life and death struggle that was tearing Europe apart at that time. Suddenly, although the windows of the apartment were closed because of the cold, they heard a roar like thunder, and the glass door onto the terrace was blown inwards by a powerful blast of air. Lightning flickered all around them, although there was no storm. They cried out in terror and went to shut the door, but suddenly felt a tremendous presence in the room, and falling on their knees were overcome with awe. Then they heard a voice which told them to write down what they heard. The voice said, "Be sure of thy spirit as I am of being the wine and the bread of the one who is above the fire and the light and foremost." The voice warned of a future catastrophe for the earth if humanity did not change course and stop killing each other. The women asked what they should do. They were told to follow the guidance of their heart. For the next 20 years, my mother and a close friend wrote down the messages that came to them from Jesus and St. Francis. I think they are more relevant now than they were then. So here I am sharing some extracts with you. And while I do this, I'm going to show you the picture of the earth. Man is on the threshold of his greatest trial since the day of my coming. This is the time when my teaching has to be fully understood. Humanity has lived for 2,000 years in a state of adolescence. Now it must become adult or sink into general criminality that will bring chaos, confusion, and final destruction. If humanity chooses adulthood and responsibility to life, it will have the millennium of peace and happiness, and Earth will join the circle of planets which have already completed their evolution and have reached the state of paradise, the state where human beings, through their own decision, will have regained the angelic state. Everywhere on this planet, the call has gone out. From far distant realms in the universe come great beings to your poor, benighted planet, to stand with the children of the light in their effort to overthrow the tyranny of evil once and for all, so that never again shall it overpower the world. If enough people stand in the light when the darkness would engulf it, then with this help from the cosmos, you will succeed in overcoming the darkness. But there is a danger that many will be intimidated into weak compromise or indifference. You need to become as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. All the great prophets have been heralding this moment, which is truly the moment of judgment of which I spoke to my disciples at the beginning of this cycle. You are all meant to work for unity and understanding. You can, by concentration, meditation, and the humility of prayer, learn to use the force of blessing in your words, your gestures, your writings, your approach to other human beings and to all other species. Peace is harmony. War and destruction are discordance. Only when men learn not to shed their brother's blood can the house of God be built on its true foundations. Until this moment comes, shall Caesar unjustly usurp the power that is God's, because those who ought to have chosen God chose Caesar, and you see the results today. Caesar's spirit came into the first church and sat enthroned in Rome, and the church fought with the arms of man instead of with the arms of God, which are prayer, meditation, and service of the divine plan. We may witness another catastrophe unless we call on the Divine Mother to help us receive the influx of power coming with the new age. There will be crisis after crisis that will completely upset the human mind and split the frame of civilization. The core of evil lies in the east, near the sands of Palestine. The wanton thirst to kill will be roused more and more. For no logical reason, blood is being shed and more will follow. So pray that your mind will be lifted above the vibration of the suffering earth, for only those who have that ability will be given the strength to resist the madness that will be the fourth horseman of these times. There will be greater and more terrible discoveries than splitting of the atom. More devastating weapons are being worked upon in secret, forces powerful enough to reverse the laws of nature. Already you see the results around you of man's presumptuous endeavor to use the elements of matter, not for beneficial purposes, but to destroy life. Destructive energy emanates from places where scientists are working to develop new weapons. This energy affects human bodies and human minds, creating split psyches, which are the equivalent on the human plane of what the splitting of energy is on the cosmic plane. There is a danger of collective insanity. If you mix the waters of knowledge with the thought of destruction, destruction will come. The control of nature now nearly acquired can be used for love and blessing, or for malediction and hate. Listen to the despairing voice of your mother, the earth. Only by raising your consciousness to the realization of the oneness of life can you escape destruction and acquire the wisdom rightly to use the power that your intelligence has given you over nature. Scientific knowledge must be raised to the level of this realization. Blessed are those who see behind and beyond the veils of separateness to the divine unity of all life. The breakup of the established churches is but a question of time and will be accomplished partly by their inability to satisfy the spiritual needs of man, and partly by the atheists who will play a greater and greater part in world events. Harmony must be found at every level, as man can no longer survive the disintegration of his psyche caused by his own destructive civilization. Only those who have reached an inner harmony between their knowledge and their intuition, their thoughts and their actions, those who are able to listen to and accept the guidance of their heart, will be given the strength and the knowledge to help their fellow men. It is through the intuition of the weak that the light will be found again, not through the will of the strong. Man has progressed in his intelligence and his mastery of scientific discoveries, but his wisdom and love have not progressed to the same extent. He is as the laborer who knew how to sow, but who has forgotten to put in the living seed, so that when harvest comes, his fields are barren, and he suffers the pangs of hunger. Truly, today, man is hungry for what he lost, since the words of my apostles died in the rituals of indifference and the greed of those who used my church to serve Caesar instead of God. The result is the destruction and the suffering you are witnessing today. Where there is blood, greed, and hate, my kingdom has been denied. It was our beloved Father's wish that man should learn slowly the working of his laws and discover the secrets of the house he was called to live in. It was not the plan that he should consider himself the architect and start building on his own. When man attempts to substitute himself for God, if he is not attuned to the cosmic law as it is reflected in nature, he may create discord, disharmony, which finally expresses itself as illness of the body, sickness of the mind, national and international diseases. And what are wars but outbreaks of international diseases? Do not offend nature. Do not offend God by tampering with the laws of nature, trying to bend them to your own destructive purposes. Every act of a human being must be judged according to the rule, does it offend nature? Does it offend God? Does it injure life? The Divine Mother is the Holy Spirit who presides over the new age. Only water and its healing strength can extinguish the overriding fires of Mars. Inspired by her, women, through their life and understanding, have been given the task of awakening in men the compassion and devotion to life taught by me at the beginning of the Piscean age. Man, through woman, will realize in himself the sense of his mission on earth and see clearly as in a mirror the law of the universe. When that time comes, the secrets of nature will be understood. The Divine Mother will be the redeemer of the new age. Like the alchemist of the Middle Ages, she will transform and fuse the harder elements in the surging waters of compassionate love. Only she can establish an equilibrium between the destructive forces and the ever-building principle of life and love. If man uses his control of nature for love and blessing, this Aquarian age will be the fulfillment of my coming. The universe is changing, and the cosmic rays which strike your planet are now potent with the power to create or destroy. The choice is man's. Will he choose to be the son or the rebel? It would be better for those of this generation never to have been born than, having been born, not to become fully awakened to the moral responsibility of this dangerous yet promise-fulfilling age. The time has come when the children of light have to create the great invisible church, which will be built on many planes of life and will be the only protection against the destructive powers which are starting to gnaw again at the roots of this unhappy planet. Think often of the source. Feel the presence of it. Think of its messengers and the amplifiers of the message. Learn to express in your own time and space what is eternal, indivisible, and holy. You should no more lead an ill-fitted life than wear an ill-fitted garment. Learn to divide your time between the duties of your daily life and those of your inner self, and give them your undivided attention. A human soul is like an instrument. It is tuned or it rings flat. When your soul is harmonious, it can vibrate with all the vibrations of the spirit and take part in the wonderful concert of the universe. Then God's harmony can be heard on the lowest level of the mineral world. You do not know how precious in the eyes of the Son are the souls he can use to orchestrate the symphony of the universe. Create gardens to protect the purity of nature from all destructive rays. Protect the birds. Tell other people about angels and make the stars weep for joy. Your channels can be blocked through grief and doubt. Throw doubt away in the name of Christ. Do not try to sort out the threads of your many lives. You will waste your time. Concentrate on the thread you are spinning now. We do the tapestry. Give us good thread. Do not despair over your lack of achievement. It needs only a few years, days, or hours of complete realization and service in one incarnation to make worthwhile the eternal spiral and your arduous way back to the heavenly spheres. Keep knocking, and gently, very gently, the door will open, so that you will have time to prepare and bear the radiance of the vision that will fill your mind with the realization of the immortal truth. Each day, each minute is a preparation. Only through awareness and longing from you to me can I bring you the blessing of the millennium. When the light comes, it is all the more luminous because of the darkness that has gone before. Verily, verily, I say unto you, receive my blessings, receive my dove, because now unity has to become the law of the earth, and those who respect it and make it their own will enter with me the kingdom of heaven. Peace be with you. It is from peace that I want to speak to you, for verily, verily, I say unto you, my future name will be the peacemaker, and it is as the master of peace that I am appearing to those who are gathered in my name throughout the world. Peace is the castle of shining truth, where the hidden can be revealed and the soul can don its robe of glory. And the messages ended with these words: love be with you, love be with the world, love be the only eternal blessing. Thank you.